socks. That's one thing I wanted to learn to knit over the lockdown period. And I knitted those socks, and they seem to have become the most famous socks.
This is making me so happy because on the end of my foot is a hand-knitted sock.
Can't get my leg up high enough. If I hold it up, you can see it better.
I'm going to start doing the can, Alan.
Here we have a knitted sock.
Oh, lovely. Now
A hand-knitted sock.
we're all talking knitted socks, aren't we? Well, I didn't wear them, but I brought them. I got those.
Hello and welcome to episode 104 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, looking super smart. It's not a cardigan, it's a sweater, I'll have you know. We have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
Well, thank you for that lovely warm welcome. And over in Cambridgeshire, on this, just looking out of the window, blue sky day. It was raining when I got up this morning, but the sun has come out. Have you got sun?
No.
You will have. It's on its way down to you. Over in Cambridgeshire, we have Thordis Maria Sophia Fredrickson with that fantastic, wonderful, mega smile.
You can come again. I think you've stolen all our sunshine. You seem to be, I think, the only one with sunshine, but bringing sunshine to the podcast. One of the kindest men in the world of horticulture, one of the kindest gardeners, full stop. We have pretty much one of my gardening gurus, really, Brian Edward Ellis. Galanthophile.
No, not quite.
No, I think I'm eclipsed here.
Galanthophile on Instagram. Just everyone needs to follow you. Your plant knowledge, the stories behind your plants. It's all so inspiring. So thank you for coming back. It's been a bit of a wait because you were last on episode 30.
I know. 74 ago.
Did
I do something wrong?
I don't really know what's happened, but as we sort of tumble towards my due date, I'm basically self-indulgently squeezing in as many of my favourites as possible and focusing on on things I want to talk about and learn before I pop and become distracted for a while. So I'm delighted that even though it's long overdue, you're back with us. And of course, peak snowdrop season. So who better than to have a snowdrop seller and a top galanthophile joining us on the podcast? First of all, I suppose, how is your snowdrop season going so far?
Well, it's not bad, apart from the fact, of course, that as so far we've had these awful frosts. And of course, once we have a bad frost, the snowdrops go down and they flop down. The flowers hit the soil, they get marked and dirty and horrible, but they come up in the sun. Unfortunately, it's been so cold, we haven't had the warmth to bring them all up again until the last couple of days, really. So I'm beginning to enjoy the snowdrops. I'm harassed on other fronts.
Just don't mention the words rabbits or deer to Brian.
Exactly.
We'll move on before he gets upset and just focus on the happy things in life. As my sort of first year really making a foray into the world of snowdrops, I've been fascinated to watch how different plants seem to cope with the cold. So Diggory and wasp have just... It takes a lot for them to flop in my raised bed, which is quite protected. It's down the side of the house. But Anglesey Abbey just went straight over, and I don't think it's really... Might have come back up this morning. But yeah, it's really interesting. You just think they'd all behave quite similarly, but obviously there are differences in their breeding, and they are very different.
Well, Anglesey Abbey, if it's a good one, is a peculiform, because when they grow in a clump, you'll find that some might not be peculiform, but it should be poculiform, which means cup-shaped, as we know. It goes back apparently to Latin, of course, where poculus was a cup. And I could never understand it. I'll send you a photo that I took of a very nice poculiform, which shows its cup shape perfectly. Now this one, can you see that the tepals are all the same size, roughly? And that's what a peculiform is. Now, if I turn it up, it should be cup-shaped.
Ah.
Well, you have to use your imagination, don't you? I mean, it's all very whimsical, this gardening lark. And this one is an interesting one because it's Lydiard Diana, and it's named after an ancestor of Diana Spencer, the king's first wife. She was 18th century, and she was painted by Joshua Reynolds, I think it was. She was a Diana Spencer, and she became the second Viscountess Bolingbroke, lived at Lydiard Park, and this I love for the shape, because if you look at, this is the receptacle, of course, we know that you can't see ovaries, so this is the receptacle where the ovaries are, and underneath to you are the claws, which are the thin bit of the tepals, and then it opens out wider, but the claws are quite long, so you get this elegant thin shape. So that's one popular form. And if I get this one, which I rather like, you can see that this too is poculiform, but quite different, because it's quite a fat one. Instead of not drooping, but being narrow skirted, as it were, this is a very full ball gown type. And this is Kermode Bear, which comes from Canada, bred by Calmetier. And it's a lovely one in a clump. It looks absolutely gorgeous.
It's such a chunky monkey.
It is a chunky monkey. We like chunky monkeys. I feel at home with them. And then if we go back to the fact that I did tell you that we've been at it since September, this is one of the latest species. It's Galanthus bursanus, which comes from the Bursa region, hence bursanus. And it's incredible because this comes out in the autumn, and you can tell it comes out in the autumn because look.
Oh.
All of the seed pods, they're like big old balls.
The seed pods already, while it's still in flower. So that's a real good one. And it's a very varied species, bursanus. There are an awful lot of them, but they're very pretty. And they're very centered as well, if it's not too cold, of course, because that's the big problem with snowdrops. What else have we got? We didn't last time, I don't think, we spoke about colour changes, did we?
No. Despite the fact that we talked for some time, we managed to not actually cover everything we wanted to. So I'm delighted you're back to talk about colour changes, because I think they're
rambling on.
And tall ones, because that looks to be quite a tall one.
Yes, it's I think it's nearly a foot, this one at the moment. And this is a German snowdrop. Of course, with Brexit, things are a lot more difficult, but fortunately we got a lot of these in before all the problems with importing plants. This is a colour changer, or I like to call them changelings, which is perhaps not quite the right thing to say. But anyhow, when it first starts to flower, the inner marks are green. And you can probably see that they've now faded to a sort of...
limey primrose.
Yeah, limey primrose. But this has been in the cold greenhouse because of all those really bad nights, because, of course, it's in a pot, and we know what that means. And so I've been protecting them a bit, but in the sun, they go bright yellow.
Oh.
And so they're quite extraordinary. Over a period of time, you start off with green, then you get that limey colour, and then they become yellow. And there are an awful lot now of colour changes, which they think probably started off with one called Blonde Inge, which has a yellow centre and a green outer. And they think that seedlings with that have become colour changes.
What was the name of that one that you just had, Brian?
This one was Schorbuser Irrlicht.
Oh gosh.
Probably
I'm really
terrible pronunciation.
Really looking forward to writing the plant list for this episode. Already. Colour changes, Brian, are they also called chameleons, or is that something different?
Well, there is a snowdrop called chameleon, of
Oh,
course.
okay.
So I avoid that because that can be confusing, and there's enough confusion in the snowdrop world. Now, you know some are big and blousy.
Love them.
Well, I expect you've got this one. This is a lovely one. This is Glenorma,
Yep.
and it's extremely vigorous. Really is vigorous and makes these lovely, huge snowdrops with a sort of almost an inverted Y inner.
Oh, yes.
Can you see that it's not just a V, that it starts to go up towards the base? And it's a big snowdrop. And the reason I wanted to show you that, because it illustrates the size, for those people that don't know snowdrops very well, of two different snowdrops. This is
it
in
a little
elwesii.
taller than most others, Brian? Because the one thing that I don't like is when you get a big flower on a short stem.
Well, I think it's fairly well proportioned, this one.
Yeah. There, looks it. Yes, looks it.
Yeah, it's a chunky plant. It's
Yeah.
not enormously tall. What's that one like? See, it's about the same as this one, which is coming up soon. I think it's a good size for a snowdrop.
Do you have plenty of that one, Glenorma?
I'm afraid I don't. And the reason I don't is because it's such a good snowdrop. You know that I grow them in lattice pots or pond baskets in the garden. And they're small pond baskets because we've got a small garden. And it increases so vigorously that I'm having to split it up every year. So I've released it into the ground. It's one of only 3 that are released in the ground. And that it's a really nice one, but I'm afraid I haven't got any. Although if you speak nicely, I'm sure that something could be done at a later point, Alan.
What are the 3 then that you have deigned to release into the ground?
Well, there's that one. There's another one which Alan will have seen, which was at Raveningham, Ace of Spades, Raveningham Hall, amongst all Lord Sir Nicholas Bacon's snowdrops. And Ace of Spades is a synonym of trim, and hereby is a tale if you can put up with it, because I could never grow trim. It was one of those snowdrops that I'd tried 3 times and lost. And at £20 upwards a bulb, you know, you don't want to be doing that. So I told Sir Nicholas that I'd lost it. And he very kindly said, would you like to see our clump of Ace of Spades? Now, one of his relatives was the lady who found Trim at Westbury-on-Trim in Gloucestershire. And I think that in the clump, there were actually 2 different clones. And one of them must have been Trim, which is, for me, more difficult to grow. And the other one was Ace of Spades. So anyhow, Sir Nicholas and John Morley and I go marching across the Arboretum while Alan and some of the others were looking at snowdrops elsewhere. And he comes up to this tree and he says, there you are. And there's this massive clump. You know, it must have been, nearly 2 foot across, absolutely cram full of Ace of Spades. And I said, that's magnificent. He said, would you like one? So I said, that'd be terribly kind, Nico. So he gets out his garden fork and very carefully digs the whole clump up and very carefully gives it to me, and I hold it very carefully. And he takes off a little clump of 3, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get 3. Oh, that's so kind. And he very carefully replanted those 3 and said, there you are. And I was left holding this massive clump. He said, put them all around the garden, because he knows what our garden's like. And so I've put them all around the garden as instructed, because they're a good seed parent. Now, the other trim isn't necessarily as good a seed parent, although you get now lots of trimmings, trim posta, trimlet, etc., etc. So I'm convinced that there were 2 different clones, one of which suits my garden and one of which has suited everybody else's garden. I could be quite wrong. So that's one that's released. And the other one that's released is a very old and very good doer, which makes magnificent, absolutely magnificent spread. And it's S. Arnott. And nearly everybody has S. Arnott because it's as cheap as chips, as old as the hills. And it was found by the Reverend S. Arnott. His name was Sam, but the snowdrop is S. Arnott because Primrose Warburg said that even his wife didn't call him Sam. And it's a nice tall one. It's heavily scented. And if you go to places like Colesbourne, there are massive drifts. And I'm so excited because this year we're going to Colesbourne with the Hardy Plant Society. So I'm really looking forward to that.
It's one of the stars of the snowdrop season. It's one of the stars of the snowdrop season at York Gate as well, because Sybil, who started York Gate, I think she started with a clump of, we'll say, I don't know, 5 or 10, and she regularly divided S. Arnott, and now it's just everywhere.
Yeah, everybody else has divided it as well, haven't they?
Yeah.
I mean, there's that magnificent path with the S. Arnott stand that each side is beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Do you know, I've said that I'm not going to buy any snowdrops this year, but I think if I don't have S. Arnott, I probably should. So maybe.
You should, yeah.
Maybe I will buy one.
Funnily enough, I bought the Proceedings and Journal of the Dumfriesshire and Galloway Horticultural and Natural Society from 1904, because in it is S. Arnott talking about snowdrops and their history, art and diseases. And I thought, oh, that would be interesting. So I bought that just recently. This is a really nice one. This is a double. We'll get in the right place.
I do love a double.
You see, yes, I know you love a double. And this is rather nice on the outers as well, because that's a better one, isn't it? I'm trying not to get the other one right on the screen. But you see how nice it looks?
Oh gosh.
Either closed or open. Quite distinct.
I love that you've got both. You've managed on one plant to have one flying and one not.
Well, there are 3 flying.
3 flying.
One not. And the reason is this one is not quite so advanced as the others. So as time will go on, it will... Oh no, I tell a lie. This one is dying. This one is going over. I need new glasses. This one's going over, so it's starting to shrivel up. But these are what it's like in a clump.
The green markings are such distinctive stripes, aren't they?
They are. It's a cross in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
But one half of the cross is wider than the others. And this is Franz Joseph. And Franz Joseph is ever such a good one for a clump.
Is Franz Joseph also expensive?
No. What have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bulbs. Oh, yeah. I think it sells for about 30, something like that. A bulb.
Ouch.
Well, I should have done this one first. Because this one is Emma Thick.
Ooh.
And you've heard of Emma?
No.
Emma Thick, the Snowdrop hat lady. Emma is now head gardener at Thenford Arboretum for Lord Heseltine. And I've known Emma for some time because we were members of Scottish Rock, and everybody who knew Snowdrops really was on Scottish Rock at that time. She started up the Facebook page for Snowdrops and Galanthophiles. And she found this, I believe, although she hasn't come back to me to tell me, at the garden at which she was previously head gardener, which was Edmondsham in Dorset. And this arose, and you can see it's a sort of trim type with a green mark on the outer. But look, 2 buds coming.
Ooh.
So vigorous plant and well worth having, especially if you know Emma, who's lovely. She was on Countryfile. You may have seen that.
I'm fairly certain I follow her on Instagram, where you get a mixture of snowdrops and cosplay.
Snowdrop hat lady, yes, you do. I showed you this one. This is one that I happened to purchase on Sunday.
How exciting.
One happened to arrive through the post today. It's sad, isn't it, really? This is an interesting one because you can see that it's got a long pedicel. So in the wind, it dances. But it's a seed-grown one. And it was grown by somebody that Alan knows, Janet Sleep.
Oh, yes.
From the Howards at Gissing. And she had seed from Richard Hobbs of various yellows. And from those seed, this is one of the ones that she got. So she's called it Norfolk Yellows because they're all slightly different. And this was the only one that was left on Sunday when I got to that bit of the stall. And I really liked it for this dangling pedicel because I haven't got one that's like that. So I thought I'd have to have it. And you can see that not only is the flower yellow, but the scape, which you would call the stem, is also pale yellow. And the leaves are not quite as green as you would expect. So that's quite a nice new acquisition.
That's a lovely soft yellow.
It is a soft yellow. Well, it's quite incredible how you can go from these ones that are almost limey green to the soft yellows, to the darker yellows, to really quite vivid yellows. Like John Morley's Mother Goose, if you look at the inner of that, it's butter yellow. I mean, it's absolutely shines. I haven't got another yellow, I don't think, because yellows they're more difficult to see the differences, I think, than the greens, because obviously there's not such a contrast between the yellow and green, white, and the green and white. So this is another Norfolk snowdrop. This was a happen chance finding in a garden centre. So it's not really Norfolk. Yeah. I expect you've met Margaret Ford, Alan.
Yes.
She lives in Wyndham, and she was looking for pots of snowdrops in Wyndham Garden Centre some years ago and found this one growing amongst 3 or 4 others, I think, in the pot. And so over time, she's gradually increased it and passed it round to people. And it's rather nice because it's got lovely green tips, as you can see. It's quite a short one in comparison with some of the others. I think if I get my, oh dear, That's the wrong one. Pull that one off. You see, that's quite a different height. But nonetheless, it's a really nice one, and everybody who sees it rather likes it. So that's a good one.
Brian?
A Norfolk Snowdrop. It's called Lynch Green, Lynch. So that's where she lives. And then going on something different again, here's a little one.
It's very dinky.
It's very dinky, and it's in flower. It's not in bud, it's in flower. And it stays like this for ages, and then it does open and drop eventually.
I'll give you a quick look and then you must go away.
Exactly, but it's rather nice, isn't it? Nice dinky little thing. And it's called Fanny Justine. It's the Belgian snowdrop. It comes from Cathy Portier, who has a Belgian company called Cool Plants. And it was found, I think, in her partner's parents' garden, and it's named for their daughter, Justine.
I didn't realise you got such funny little snowdrops. I'll be honest, I didn't know you could get ones that just sort of sat there looking a bit buddy, but actually they were doing their thing.
There are only a few, and they're not common. You do find them occasionally, and people are always pleased to find them. It's that thing where, I mean, normally snowdrops are like that, aren't they? But at Colesbourne, they found one which was bolt upright and looked sideways, which they called Lord Lieutenant after Henry Elwes, because he was Lord Lieutenant of Gloucestershire. I think it's Gloucestershire. And there are others that, well, they're sort of in between, you know.
So in those sort of uprightish, that group, I don't know if they have an official name, is that where some of the claw type ones would fit in, or are they something completely different?
Oh, what, like the arbor claw, you mean? No, they're spikies. They're completely different. I haven't got a spiky to show you, but whereas we'll go on to the next picture while it's another nice green marked outer one. You can see it's got 3 outer petals, or tepals, I should say, and 3 inner tepals. Well, in a spiky snowdrop, all the tepals are actually thin and long, and they're very much like facing forward, as you say, but the shape is completely different. So, I mean, the arbor claw is one that you all know. And I was staggered when I started making a list of spiky snowdrops to find over 40.
Crikey.
I know.
Yeah.
It's quite astounding, isn't it? And some of them are quite old ones. And you get the ones that are in between, like walrus, which you probably know, which has 1 or 2 very long tepals on the outside. And so that's getting there, but it's not a spiky really. And Guy Barker, I should say, he has found a couple of nice spikies, one called Medusa and one called Icarus, which are rather, and they're very short, like Fanny Justine. You don't get really tall spikies. I think probably the tallest one is probably the arbor claw, and that will be about 6 inches in old money. And apart from that, you know, they're all short.
And the one you've got in front of you, what was that one called?
This one is an elwesii from the lovely Walensue Staines at Glenchantry. Marvellous garden, which used to open and sadly does no more. But they sell snowdrops. And this one was named, like Glenorma, that really big one, after the garden. This is Glenchantress with nice green marks on the outers.
Clever snowdrop naming. There are so many clever snowdrop names out there.
With another short one with quite a little different shape as well, because it sort of scoops out straight from the receptacle, doesn't it? And it's a long receptacle. It's only a small flower, but it's a long receptacle, a long mark, long tepals, and a pale colour. And it's very wispy, isn't it? And its name is Wisp. And in a clump, it's absolutely gorgeous, because it's just a mass of pale, limey, yellowy flowers with this mark on it as well. That's really lovely.
So excited about the idea of clumps of snowdrops. It's one of the lovely things if you go to somewhere like East Ruston, where you've been collecting snowdrops for a while, and they get that chance to clump up, and there is nothing quite like seeing particularly some of the more extraordinary ones in a lovely, like wasp, nice big chunky clump. Unlike in my garden where I have one or two.
Yeah, but you will get clumps in time.
You do.
I mean, it's always fascinating that you think to yourself, well, I've only had that about 2 or 3 years, and look at the size of it. But it's not. It's probably nearer to 6 years, and you've forgotten.
Wow. I have one called Sybil Stern, which is a very old variety named after F.C. Stern's wife. And he wrote about snowdrops and leucogens, snowdrops and snowflakes. And Sybil Stern I bought about 9-10 years ago. Last year I had 3 flowers. But I can beat that, because on my Instagram this morning, I put a picture of one which came from Marjorie Fisher's garden at East Lambrook. It was found in the ditch, which is famous for a variety of snowdrops. And it's called Lambrook Green Sleeves. And I've had it for 13 years. And it's now made a clump. But it has been a long, slow process. Whereas others, they're quite vigorous, as is this one. This is the last one I'll show you. You'll be pleased to know. This was named after the late John Sayles' grandson. And John Sayles worked for the National Trust. And I think he lived in Norfolk at the end of his life, because when I was in hospital earlier this year, one of the nurses said, "Oh, perhaps you know John Sayles." So I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh, that's my uncle." Small world. So this is named after John Sayles' grandson, because he was, like lots of older people, not computer literate, and his grandson was called Ted. And Ted was the one who did all his computing. So this is CompuTed. Isn't that a good name?
It is a good
And you can
name,
see
yeah.
it makes quite a nice clump.
Great name.
Quite a nice clump.
And I mean, when I started last year and I bought my first snowdrops, I was very much trying to limit myself to ones that were around like £5 to £10. And would you sort of, on the whole, feel like if you're starting, the cheaper ones are generally the better doers, which is why they're cheap? So if you want a clump and you don't, want to risk spending lots of money and having a 13-year wait, maybe start with the more affordable.
Well, it's always the sensible thing if you're starting a snowdrop collection and you don't know how they grow, because you've got to learn about the plants as with all plants. So yes, buy the cheap ones, because you will know that they're tried and tested, they're easy to grow, they clump up fairly vigorously, so you'll soon have a lot of snowdrops. And that's the best way to do it. I mean, when you come to, the top end is £300-400, and you don't want to risk buying one of those, as lovely as they are. I mean, last no, 2 years ago, I was very kindly given a snowdrop which cost £450. And when I went in the spring to have a look at my site where it was, in its lattice pot with its label, I found a very neat hole.
Oh.
And it had been dug up by a squirrel, I think, and replaced by a conker. And I looked, it's not funny, Thordis, it's not funny. I looked everywhere around the garden, absolutely everywhere, to see if there was this snowdrop on the ground. Couldn't find it anywhere. Haven't seen it since. So, you know, I'm so pleased it was a gift. I felt absolutely dreadful, guilty that it was a gift and I'd lost it.
Well, you didn't lose it. I mean, you were sabotaged by a squirrel.
Yes, yes. So these things happen. These things happen.
Squirrel with a sense of humour. Obviously, definitely not funny.
Squirrel with good taste, I'll have you know.
Yeah.
Very good taste. Cordon bleu taste.
Well, you've just now managed to make, I think, everybody else who's lost a snowdrop they spent a bit of money on, or a gardening gift, you made them feel better, because that story is surely worse.
I always think that you should let people know that, you know, you may grow a lot of snowdrops, but you lose them as well.
Yeah.
And I was very pleased, a couple of years ago on the stall, one of the national collection holders came and he bought 1 or 2 snowdrops. I said, what on earth are you buying snowdrops from me for? And he said, well, you always lose them, you know. So it's not just the ordinary people who lose them, it's the experts as well.
That's making me feel better when I eventually discover that 1 or 2 of mine have probably not made it through, but we'll keeping fingers crossed.
Well, you know what I say, don't you? They're only bulbs.
Yes.
Only.
Is that what you said when you discovered the conker?
No, I can't repeat what I said when I discovered the conker. Right.
Oh,
Morning, Thordis.
I can hear you.
Can you see me?
Not
No.
yet.
Start video. That would make a lot of difference.
There you are. Hello.
How are you? How are you blooming?
I'm all right. I'm massive. Look at this.
Oh, Lord, you are. How many are you having?
Exactly.
And just for you, hang on.
The Nordic socks. Are they as toasty as they look and sound?
Yeah, they are. What a pain. Good
Oh,
morning, Alan.
Good morning.
there we go. This is exciting. I'm excited.
Any minute now, Mr. King's going to come down the stairs and go clomp, clomp, clomp.
Oh, here he comes.
Morning, Thordis.
Morning.
And Alan.
Morning, Alan.
Good morning.